I've definitely had a few experiences where I felt like languagism came into play. I give tours on my college campus, and a lot of times when I mention where I'm from, I'll have parents tell me things like, "Your accent is really good," or like, "Your English is great." And I've been learning English almost as long as I've been learning Spanish, so it's just like a little bit funny for me to hear things like that, and it just kind of does make me feel a little bit othered. Apart from that, one of the experiences that really stands out to me is one time I was speaking on the phone in Spanish, and a child around maybe 9 or 10 years old yelled at me to go back to Mexico. I'm not from Mexico, so this kind of really shook me, and I just watched the kid's parents come out behind him, and I was really just kind of wondering what's going on over there. But that definitely stuck with me. Just like hearing Spanish and having that reaction is something that really stays with you.
I couldn't remember one of the words to translate in English, and I immediately lost like four different people in the conversation just because since I didn't know the word in English, then the story wasn't important.
I have an American accent, and every single time I say, yeah, I'm Spanish, every single person is like, what, really? You're Spanish? How come you have such a good accent? And every time I'm just like annoyed because I don't really understand how the fact that I'm from Spain does always have to influence the accent that I have, but and that was just kind of really annoying. Like, it doesn't really hurt me in any way because I'm just used to it since I've kind of lived in different places and I've heard all of the comments.
I grew up in Atlanta, and I'm from Argentina, and my first language is Spanish. And my dad and I were speaking Spanish at a grocery store, and the cashier asked me if I was speaking Mexican. That's not a language. So that was weird, or not even weird. It was just unfortunate.
So like I guess a lot of times, because I've grew up learning English, a lot of times people, when they hear me speaking English and find out I'm from Brazil, they're like, oh my god, you don't have an accent. And that can be like very offensive, and people just assume that because I'm foreign, I have to have an accent in my English. And then when I tell them that I'm from Brazil, they also assume that I'm not 100% Brazilian, whatever that may mean for them. They think that I'm not fluent in Portuguese, or they think I speak Brazilian, and they're just very ignorant about it all. And there's also, like, when I was younger as well, I used to have a stronger accent, and people would disregard me for it, and they would think that I was stupid because I had a stronger like Brazilian accent in my English. And it's not like that. Like, with me, sometimes even when I speak English, it'll take me a second, or I'll say words that it might not make sense because I think in three languages at the same time. So there's a lot of times people can be prejudiced against that.
I'm not paying attention to that, and I don't focus on that. So it may happen all the time, but it's not something that either bothers me or takes too much of my conscious awareness. But yeah, of course, it's one that I remember when I first got here was to try to pronounce yogurt in proper English, and have people responding with what is it, what, many times. That was a little annoying at that point. The frustration of not being able to communicate properly and fast in a transaction that should have not taken too long, need to go through a very long explanation of what you needed. But as I said, at this point, it's not something that I'm too annoyed or too aware of.
I vividly remember my first day of Spanish class in an American university where the majority of the students were Latinos. And I remember introducing myself, and my professor goes, "Oh, the Spaniard, you speak with a lisp." And the entire class burst out laughing. And it just made me feel kind of embarrassed and uncomfortable because it was the first day of class. And I'm still not sure if the professor was joking or not. But I remember explaining to him, like we don't have a lisp, we pronounce different letters in different ways, but we still say the S like a regular S.
I've experienced languagism when a group of people were speaking Spanish, and then I joined in the conversation, started speaking Spanish with them, and they were confused as to why I could speak Spanish because I'm from India. And I guess the way it made me feel is, well, obviously not great, and felt as if only like people from the Hispanic world should be able to speak Spanish, when that's clearly not the case.
So my experience with languagism here at Emerson College would be specifically with my suite mates. I always had like mental word blocks. Usually I speak in Spanglish, which is what they call like a mix of Spanish and English. Even when I naturally speak Spanish, it happens. So I'll usually get words mixed up and my friends will laugh at me or something, or correct me. Sometimes they don't even correct me, they'll just laugh at me.
I've experienced languagism a lot in my life. I don't think I really ever noticed it until I was older, but I'm obviously an English speaker and I'm also a Spanish speaker. My mother and all of her family are from Puerto Rico and they all live there. My mother actually just moved back there. And I also spent 3 years in Spain with my family as a kid. Like, we just like moved there for a while, so I had to learn how to read and write in Spanish. And I actually learned that before learning English, writing and reading in school. But because I'm white and American and I don't have any sort of accent when I'm speaking English, a lot of people assume I'm not bilingual. And especially when I speak Spanish and have a more like Puerto Rican accent, people are very surprised. I don't necessarily think that people are like trying to be offensive. I think it's just like ingrained in them to be like surprised and kind of weirded out by the fact that I am pretty proficient in Spanish. And I think the way that it's like most commonly an issue is I can understand people speaking Spanish, and that can cause problems if they're like trying to talk about me and then I'm just like, hey, I can understand you, and it's just kind of weird. I think I've experienced it a lot on college campuses just because there are a lot of international students, which is something I never experienced in high school or middle school. And so I come into contact with a lot of like extremely fluent Spanish speakers who like their first language was Spanish. And I'm not exactly like accepted as a Spanish speaker, and I feel almost like I shouldn't be speaking Spanish because I'm not good enough.
It's actually happened to me a lot where when people first find out that I speak Spanish or they first hear me speak Spanish, they automatically assume that I'm Mexican, which is not the case. I'm from Venezuela, and it's kind of rude and in a way it's insulting that people are so quick to jump to this conclusion just because they are not educated in the fact that there's so many different Hispanic cultures and how we're all so extremely different. We even have different like vocabulary, everything.
I've experienced languagism or linguistic prejudice several times, both while living in the US and living in Spain. It's something that I deal with all the time and kind of just brush off at this point because I hear it so often. But the time that stood out to me the most, I think, was in freshman year. My roommate, who's American, asked me and my other roommate, who's Uruguayan, for a synonym for a word that she needed to put in an essay. And we both kind of stopped to think about what word she could use. And before we could even answer, she was like, wait, never mind, I don't know why I'm asking you guys. You guys speak Spanish. And I think it shocked me because this is someone who I consider one of my best friends. But in that moment, she kind of made me feel like an outsider and kind of judged my capabilities of speaking English. And I just felt like even just for a second, she made me feel like I wasn't as smart, I wasn't as capable, and I just would never really be able to be fully American, even though I was born here and I've been speaking English my entire life. And just because I grew up in Spain and I speak Spanish shouldn't take away from that and shouldn't put me as less in comparison to her.
One time when I was a sophomore at Emerson, I was at lunch with me and my friends. One of my friends from Puerto Rico and the other one's from the Dominican Republic, and we were just speaking Spanish amongst ourselves because my parents are from Argentina, and a girl walked up to us and said, "Oh, are you guys Spanish, like from Spain?" And us being from different Spanish speaking countries sort of were like surprised by that, just because the accent is so different of what we were speaking compared to that of the Spanish accent. So we had to explain to her, no, he's from Puerto Rico, my family's from Argentina, and that's why the accents vary, and none of us were from Spain. But I feel like there's a lot of people that when they hear us speak Spanish immediately assume, oh, we're from Spain or from a random Spanish-speaking country, when the accents vary, the culture is very different, and I think it's important that people know that, rather than just assuming.
Yeah, like one time I was talking to some guy for like 15 minutes. It was all nice, we were having a conversation, and then he's like, "Oh, it's so cool that you've come all the way from Australia here." And I'm like what? And I say to him like, "No, I'm from England." He goes, "Are you sure?" I'm like, "What?" But I don't know. Most of the time it's like positive. Like I can't lie. Most of the time it's like, "Oh, it's cool, you're English," but occasionally, yeah, it just gets annoying. One time I was walking down the street and I was saying to someone, "Oh, I'm so sick and tired of people going, 'Oh my god, you're English, oh my god, that's so cool.'" And then as I said that, some stranger stopped me and was just like, "Wait, are you British? Like, that's crazy." And it's just like, give it a rest.
One experience that I've had a few times is there's certain words that I mispronounce when I'm thinking quickly. And as a native English speaker, but also coming from Mexico, some people do tend to make comments about it. It's kind of frustrating because I'm like, I'll make the same mistake, both English or Spanish, but I feel like I have to apologize at that moment, because if not, they're going to keep on referring to it.
I do think that if there's anything that professors or colleges could do, it would be to make sure there's sensitivity training, just so that people know what's going on and they don't make comments that might make anyone feel uncomfortable in a classroom environment, for sure.
I don't know if there's anything college campuses can do to make it better. You're either cultured or you're not. And I just think people are more prone to assuming someone's culture or where they're from if they hear a certain language, and I don't know if people have the desire to become more educated in that sense.
I guess people should just be mindful that there are people out there with interesting stories that don't exactly fit the convention of what their preconceived ideas may lead them to believe, and just being mindful of that and being appreciative of different people's stories can go a long ways to combating languages.
I think so. I think that I know that during orientation we did a lot of sensitivity training for just like our orientation leaders in general here on campus, because not just with language but with all international students, people often tend to ask very ignorant questions, and I think that as international students we're very aware of the world in general and of like different cultures and how to be respectful and know how to ask questions. And rather than, like, for example, instead of being, "Hey, oh my god, you don't have an accent at all," ask, "Oh, where did you learn your English? Do you speak any other languages?" It's all about how you phrase it. I think that there's nothing wrong about being curious and asking questions. It's just about how you phrase it, and understand that there's more to the world than just English and than just the United States.
I don't think it can be changed on college campuses. I think it's just a thing. But I think it's something that people can be more aware about, and I think it's something that people at Emerson should understand. When international students come, there might be some word blocks or some type of English that they won't understand.
I think this is something that just people individually have to sort of go through on their own. I think maybe there are ways that the college could help. I can't think of any, but maybe workshops and stuff where people can sort of be a little more up to date on stuff like this.
Like, I don't know if there is much that they can do, because people are from where they're from, and on both sides of the sword. Like, you're American from Middle America that's just where they happen to be from, and the person who's not, that's just how it is. It's such a blend of people and cultures that it's inevitable that occasionally it happens.
I think in college campuses, the other things, there's a lot of international students, so in a way, like, you have to be used to it, like, not everybody's a native speaker. Also, like, maybe just remind people, like, if you go to another country with a different language and you make a mistake, like, it's going to be you on the receiving end. So it's just like, understand that not everybody can do it, like, perfectly.
I don't think there's one specific thing that all colleges can do to fix this linguistic prejudice that happens on campuses, not only in Boston, but everywhere across the globe. But I do think that it's something that individuals need to put an effort towards, and it's something that through cultural awareness classes like this psychology of prejudice class, or through sensitivity training for professors, orientation leaders, and students in general, can be something that will be improved and can be lowered. But overall, linguistic prejudice is something that's always going to be present as long as people continue believing and thinking that their country is the only country in the world, or that their language is the best language in the world. And it's just something that we need to work on all together.
So I think if there is a way for like colleges to help with the microaggressions of languagism, it would be to just kind of remind students that everybody should be like accepted in whatever fluency they have for any language. So whether it's that you aren't speaking English as well as you'd like to, or as proficiently as your peers, you shouldn't be put down for that. And if you want to learn another language, that's amazing, and you should be able to do that without being put down or feeling weird about it. So yeah, I just think that like generally promoting positivity around learning different languages and speaking different languages, no matter what your proficiency is or where you learned it or why you learned it or what language it is, like just do it all. Yeah.